Today I'm joined by Jonathan Moxon, to discuss what can be done to help combat flooding in our area. According to figures released by the Met Office, December 2015 was actually the wettest month ever recorded in the UK, receiving almost double the average rainfall. Now, in addition to this, it was also one of the warmest. This resulted in widespread flooding across the UK, which has continued in some parts into January, with 21 flood alerts in England and Wales and 4 in Scotland in the first week of January alone. And this has caused immense disruption to rail links, roads, destroying bridges and causing havoc in people's homes, villages, towns and cities. Locally here in West Yorkshire, Mytholmroyd, Headbridge Bridge and Elland were badly hit, with Elland Bridge being so badly damaged it had to be closed.
One of the recommendations is a lot of companies are making new builds. They absolutely don't care about the damage that they cause to the environment and the effect it would have on flooding. They'll just clear a timber area and build houses. It can cause flooding in other areas. They don't care, and they've taken no preventative measures. They need to be held accountable for the building work they've already done and the building work they're going to do.
Basically higher flood defences, because all around the back where we live it's just all mud. Basically if the water comes over we're all going to get flooded, so they've only done a little bit down this area here. They should have gone all the way up, and plus the wall should be built a bit higher, because the water can still rise and get over that. There's just nothing to defend, no defence there at all. No, I really don't think they do enough, because there's other places in this area which have been flooded and it's just all it is fences, that's it. There's no defence at all, so yeah, they should be doing more.
So Jonathan, thank you ever so much for coming on the show today.
You're welcome.
It's a very, very emotive subject, is this?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your role before we start anything else.
So I work at the Environment Agency,
Okay.
Based within West Yorkshire, working with different partners and different teams within the Environment Agency to look at how we can reduce flood risk, looking at building schemes, informing the public better about the risks of flooding and how they can prepare for it. Whole range of different things across flood risk management in general.
Now, I'm going to pick up on what you've just said there, if I may. You've just said about letting people know how they can prepare themselves.
Yeah.
In what way?
There's quite a wide range of things that people can do.
Okay.
So there's a lot of information widely available in advance of flooding. So any time from now, people can check whether they're at risk of flooding. They may not even know that they live in a flood risk area. They could look at that before they're looking to move house. They could just look at that in terms of their route to work or their route to schools. So through the gov.uk website, the flooding page is there. There's a massive amount of information about areas at risk, what you can do to prepare in terms of making flood plans or flood proof in your home, in terms of the way that you set your home out, just to try and reduce the impacts of flooding, because it's not always possible to completely eradicate the risk of flooding, in every location.
What's a flood plan?
A flood plan, to be honest, it could just be a piece of paper that you've written out, or there is actually a template on our website as well.
Right, okay.
And it's a really useful guide to try and talk you through the way that you might ask some questions. So in terms of, where have I got my valuables? Could I store them in a different way? Do I know who my emergency contact details are? Do I know where my gas meter is, or my electric box, or do I know how to switch my services off? Do I know to contact in case of emergency? Do other people know how to get in touch with me if there is a flood? So a real range of things that you'd associate with a disaster, I suppose. But it can really feel like that for people when it happens. So anything you can do in advance, it's really worth it when it comes to it.
To be honest, I didn't know. I did know about the website, but I didn't know that there was the option of a flood plan and also to get the notifications.
And so depending on which community you live in, there actually could be further support within your community. So we have a number of flood wardens around the country, but we've got a really good number of flood wardens in West Yorkshire. And actually they've been critical to the response that we've had in recent weeks. I'd go as far as saying they've saved people's lives. So in your community, it might be that you've got a flood warden as well, and that's something that the Environment Minister can help with in terms of you finding out who's in your community and who can help you out.
Right, I was just going to say, how do you find out if there is a flood warden?
Again, our floodline service is a really useful way of finding that out, or just calling our contact centre and they'd be able to put you in touch with the local team to find out what's available in your area.
That's brilliant. So obviously, thank you for that and that information, but let's take it a bit further back as to why it's actually happening. Why are we getting these floods?
I think you touched on at the start, around wettest December on record.
Yeah.
Actually, November was really wet as well. I think in total, the year is the wettest year,
Right.
If not the second wettest year. And I think all that combined with high rainfall, especially on Boxing Day, Christmas Day into Boxing Day, just means that the rivers were completely swollen.
Okay.
Ground was completely saturated in advance of all that rainfall. So down the river systems, across on the River Aire and the River Calder, we've seen the highest levels ever. So at Hebden Bridge, I think it was way in exceedance of the highest ever recorded level at Hebden Bridge.
Wow.
And that was the same for quite a number of locations.
When I was little, we used to have a gentleman called Harry Shaw, never forget him, and he had a dumper truck. Not that that's really relevant, but he used to actually clean what we called the catch, which was the bit of waterway between the moors and Blackmorefoot Res, to the top side of Meltham. Now, I believed that him cleaning that catch and getting it free of, like the silt and also the grasses and weeds that were growing would actually help so that it didn't overflow. Now we talk, and I've seen it on the news, about dredging. Is dredging something that could help stop this if we dredged the rivers?
I think what you've talked about there is more aligned to upland management, so just generally the practices of how do we manage areas in the upstream areas of catchments. And there's lots of different technical versions of what you might call dredging, but in some respects managing upland areas, making sure that they've got as much capacity in the soils as they could do, as much storage as possible, is definitely something that we're interested in, and it works in some catchments, has a less impact in other catchments, but in general, is it something that's useful? Yeah, definitely.
Right.
In terms of dredging per se and removing lots of material out of rivers, in some places that does have a benefit, and in some places it's extremely costly and it doesn't really have an impact. And that's something we've got to be really careful about in terms of spending the public purse, that we're spending money on the things that make the biggest impact.
It's been said, I've heard it a few times now, that we can't dredge these rivers because our hands are tied with being part of the EU. And if we weren't part of the EU, we could dredge the rivers. Is that right?
I think back to what I said before about just making a decision on is it the right thing to do from an economic point of view is a big factor. But then at the same time, yeah, we need to be really careful at the impact that we have on the river. They are a natural ecosystem, but that doesn't prevent us making that decision. It's legislation that's there, and it's to help us make sure that we maintain and protect the environment. But that's just balanced alongside lots of other decisions around, is it economically viable?
Yeah.
Is it the right thing to do in that particular location? Will it have the impact? So it doesn't prevent us making that decision. It's just part of the factors that we've got to consider, just like any other location and any other legislation that we've got to.
So being part of the EU is neither here nor there when it comes to dredging.
No,
it's down to the
It's more
Environment
about
Agency.
there are lots of pieces of legislation that make sure that we do things in the right way, and that's one piece of legislation. The Water Framework Directive is probably the piece of legislation that they're referring to. We just balance that alongside every other decision that we need to make.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Jonathan.
Welcome.
I do appreciate your honesty with that. So that's it for today. If you want to see another edition of the Weekly Wind-Up, we're online on Friday this week.
However large or small your business, attracting new customers requires dedication and a lot of patience. Just like fishing, but you also need the right gear. Rods,
reels, lines, hooks, sinkers, lures,
tackle box, tackle bag, net, bait, gas gloves, clothes, and pocket knife, lunch.
Or you could simply advertise with KLTV. Online, grow your business and your clientele. KLTV, your vision made reality. Should have gone to KLTV.